Welcome everyone to the webinar entitled Boomer to Zoomer, a basic Zoom guide for lawyers. My name is Reginald Hirsch. This webinar is sponsored by the Family Law sections of the Houston Bar Association and Collin County Bar Associations. You will note in the bottom left-hand corner is the MCLE number for reporting to the State Bar. Before introducing our panel of speakers, a few cautionary notes. You will note that some of the presentation today will exclude discussions of security issues which have become of some notoriety with regard to Zoom. While we will not be discussing those issues during this webinar, lawyers are reminded of their duties to protect confidential communications and information personal to their clients, such as HIPAA. And while maintaining technical competency, we certainly recommend that you use Zoom in its latest updates and check for them. It is now my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our speakers today. First, Rick Robertson, Managing Partner for Coons Fuller, located in Plano, Texas. Rick, will you give us a hand wave? Thank you. Sally Pretorius, also with Coons Fuller in Dallas, Texas. Sally?
Hi.
Craig, hi Sally. Craig Haston with the Haston Law Firm here in Houston. Craig?
Hey there.
And my name is Reginald Hirsch. I know many of our viewers today may have difficulty discerning who are the boomers and who are the zoomers on this panel, but we promise by the end of this presentation, it will be quite clear. Now for our presentation, let me discuss with you how we will handle the webinar today. It will have four distinct parts. The first will be hosting. This is setting up Zoom as a video audio conference as a host. Then there will be the invitee or participating section, which will set you up with Zoom as a participant in the video audio conference. Finally, Sally, next to last, will be Sally speaking on preparing Zoom documents, evidence, and exhibits utilizing PDFs, and Craig Haston will speak on mediating with Zoom. So it's now my distinct pleasure and honor to have Rick take care of section one, hosting a Zoom meeting. Rick?
Thank you, Reg. I sure do appreciate being here. And you know, speaking at so many seminars, one of the things I like to do at the beginning of every conference is to be sure and warn everyone to silence their cell phones. But you know what? Today, we don't care. You can have your cell phone going. You can have babies screaming in the background. You can have dogs barking. You can have anything you want because this is a whole different world. I will have to say, I've never yet spoken at a seminar where I'm looking out a beautiful golf course where I can see everything that's going on out there, and it's really fun. It's really terrific. So let's go to some of these slides. And do I have control of my own slide sharing, or Craig, are you doing it for me?
I believe you have control, Rick.
All right, well, let me try, because in fact, my screen says you cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing. So somebody is already sharing it. It may be, there we go. I will start the screen sharing now and see if we can make some progress in this. And so bear with us because this is kind of a first for all of us too. The first section is hosting a Zoom meeting. And Zoom is really not all that difficult, but if you are going to host that Zoom meeting, the first thing that you need to do is to go to zoom.us and download Zoom and log in and sign up and get an account going. And that's going to be covered a little bit more in another section. But once you have done that, and once you've installed Zoom on your computer or your device, because Zoom is cross-platform. Zoom can be installed on a Windows computer, on a Windows laptop, on a MacBook, on a MacBook Air, on an iPad or an iPhone. I think it can also even be installed on an Android phone. And so you can operate Zoom from all of those devices, and you can use it as a great tool for conferencing with others. In fact, so many of our courts are now using Zoom for hearings. Some of them are emergency hearings. Many of them aren't quite as much of an emergency as some of the lawyers would have you believe, but I think that it may be a thing of the future. In fact, Sally and I appeared in a Zoom hearing in front of a judge just this week, and we were told at the time that we can expect this to be the wave of the future, even once the courtrooms get back in business again. And in fact, he said, Rick, I think what's going to happen is that we're going to have Zoom conferences, especially for non-evidentiary hearings, such as any kind of discovery disputes and things like that. But as you can see on your screen right now is a very simple format. And in fact, that format is the format that is going to be on your computer or on your device. And it just shows 4 major buttons. The first button is New Meeting on the left, then Join, then Schedule a Meeting, and Share the Screen. So let's stop and remember that if we're going to be hosting a meeting, the first thing we have to do is to schedule that meeting. So if you want to schedule a meeting, we're going to the next slide, and you can see this is the menu that pops up. It's very simple. You can topic that meeting. You can call it whatever you wish. You can call it Let's Share Recipes, or Happy Hour, or something like Temporary Hearing in the Garza matter. It gives you an opportunity to plug in the dates, to set a meeting ID, which is going to be generated automatically, which is an easy one to do and a better one to do than trying to use the personal ID, because using one that is generated automatically, you end up keeping that security issue. And if you see, as Reggie also talked about, the next button down is password. And password is something that we encourage everyone to use. It kind of keeps you from having bombed Zoom meetings. And if any of you have seen some of the things that are on YouTube that are out there in the media right now, there are all kinds of situations where people have gotten hold of a meeting ID and no password and gone in and bombed some of the Zoom meetings. It also shows whether you're going to start with video on or off, audio on or off, and what kind of calendar that you're going to use. It doesn't really matter whether you start with the video on or off. As a host, I like to start with the video off so that it gives me the opportunity to check it out, and I like to do the same with the audio as well. On calendar, it shows several different calendars that may be available to you, whether it's iCal, Google Calendar, Outlook, or other calendars. And then, of course, it has the important button that says Schedule. So let's go to that button. When that happens, it goes to your email. And in fact, Reggie's going to talk a little bit later about how to have add-ons with Outlook, add-ons with Google Chrome, things of that nature. But this is what pulls up immediately when you hit that schedule button and you're going to be a host in Zoom. And as a host in Zoom, this gives you the opportunity, with all the data that's attached, to decide who you want to send it to, who you want to invite, how long the duration is going to be. You can change the start time, you can change the date, all of those things. But this gives you an idea of what it looks like when you are hosting a Zoom meeting. And as you see, the hyperlinked section in the middle of that screen that says Join Zoom Meeting is exactly what you will need when you receive that email to join a Zoom meeting that is hosted by someone else, whether it's hosted by a judge, whether it's hosted by a mediator, whether it's hosted by another lawyer for a settlement conference or something of that nature. So that's the next screen that comes up as a host. Okay, you've sent that out, and now you've actually hit a button to start the meeting. Now remember, I said that if you leave the settings to have the audio and the video off when you are first hosting a meeting, this is the screen that pops up. As you can see, it says Join with Computer Audio, and just underneath Join with Computer Audio, it has Test Speaker and Microphone. Now that's not your only option. Obviously, you see at the top left of the center section there, it says Phone Call, so you can use a dial-in number instead of using your computer audio. So many of the laptops that we have these days are terrific. And as terrific laptops that they are, they have cameras built in, they have microphones built in, they have reasonably good audio, and there are a lot of other devices that you can get to improve the audio and the video, but we won't bother going into those right now. But this is always a great opportunity from my perspective to try testing your speaker and microphone. So this is the screen that comes up when you hit test my speaker and microphone. And it says, do you hear a ringtone? And as you can see down at the bottom left, it has output level. We have 3 bars up. You get to hear a ringtone and you can respond yes or no. If you don't hear that ringtone, well, of course, you increase the volume on your laptop or on whatever device that you're ending up using. The same thing happens when you're using the microphone. It's always important to test the microphone to make sure that it's working right. There's nothing worse than participating in a hearing and the judge saying, Mr. Robertson, I can't hear you. Can you wave your hand if you can hear me? But I can't hear you. So you need to make some adjustments. By the same token, you want to make sure that your internet connection is good, because if your internet connection is bad, then your voice will come through badly. It will drop words. It will drop phrases. You lose all the benefit of whatever oratory skills that we have all worked so hard to develop as lawyers. So it's a very important point to make sure that you have good internet connections, and go ahead and run that test to test your microphone and to test your audio. All right. So let's go on to this next section. Remember, I said that if you decided to invite people, you have 2 or 3 other options. This is one of the other options that you can use. If you want to add other people that you failed to invite to the meeting, you can pull up this screen, which is one of the screens that is right there in the opening screen for the host. And you can choose. You can choose contacts. You can choose email. If you see at the bottom left, it says that you can copy the URL, copy the invitation. There's also a meeting password that you have there. So again, you can invite additional people to join. Sometimes we see people do that as judges may want to invite a witness to come in that they may not have sworn in at the very beginning, or a witness that may come up during the course of the hearing that was not necessarily disclosed. It may be a rebuttal witness or something of that nature. But under any circumstances, we just want to let everybody know that there are plenty of other ways to accomplish things, and Zoom, being easy to use just like it is, gives you various options to do so. All right, so you've started your Zoom meeting. And that, of course, is me without proper lighting, me without any kind of virtual background, me in my study at home wearing my normal clothes as opposed to my courtroom clothes. But the point is to give you an opportunity to see what comes across the bottom of the screen. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you see a number of different icons, or a number of different buttons. You have the mute button. That's really an important button, especially if your dog starts barking or your baby starts crying. Don't hesitate to hit that mute button. If you're getting bad connectivity because of your internet, you can always hit the stop video button. And if you've set it up right, it's simply going to have a picture of you, and you can apologize and say, I'm sorry I had to stop the video, but the connection was bad, and that will improve it. In addition to those, you have your other normal buttons like participants and sharing, those kinds of things. So it's a great, easy tool that is easy to explore, and we're just giving you a good idea of what that looks like now. So let's go on to the next slide. The next slide is pulling up settings. And I pulled up settings by simply clicking on the left arrow, which is right by the video button, and this pulls up a number of settings. Some of the settings give you an opportunity to use a virtual background. I'm sure that many of you have seen, if you've done a Zoom hearing before, that you've seen somebody that looks like they're in San Francisco by the Golden Gate Bridge, or that they're out in Hawaii with the gentle breezes blowing and the waves washing in. Well, that's because they pulled up this screen. And Reggie is going to go a little bit more into virtual backgrounds, but this screen is important because of the numerous setting buttons that are on the left, which include general, video, audio, share screen, chat. One of the great features is the ability to do chat during the middle of a Zoom presentation. And if you're doing chat during the middle of a Zoom presentation, it's a way to pass notes back and forth between 2 attorneys who are on the same side, for example, in doing their presentations. But again, this is for demonstrative purposes only, and it just is to give you a general idea of what things look like. Let's go to the next slide. The next slide is a very important feature called recording, because Zoom meetings can all be recorded. And when you record a Zoom meeting, one of the things that you're doing is saving it to go back and check, for example, what a witness said, or what was shared with a mediator, or other things of that nature. And the host has the ability not only to record, but also to allow other people to record as well. And I'm sure that Reggie is going to talk a little bit more about some of the recording features and how that translates, because in fact, that's what we're doing right now. We're simply recording this Zoom presentation so that it can be posted later for everyone's viewing. And there's a little bit of downtime in terms of processing it, but how many times would it have been great to be able to have a recording? Especially of a hearing or especially of a deposition, and to have the recording on your own. In fact, I will not be surprised if we don't see more Zoom depositions take place in the future, where you simply have a court reporter swear them in, but you don't necessarily have a videographer who does everything in the way that we have all been used to so often in the past. So again, let's just go on to the next feature. And let me go back one. Well, I won't try to go back one. I didn't mean to do that. Let's see how I can go back and to where I was. One of the things that is important to keep in mind when you are recording a video during a screen sharing and things of that nature is that the host has the sole authority to allow other people to record or not. So you are very likely to have to ask permission. In fact, you will have to ask permission if a judge or a magistrate is the host of any kind of a Zoom conference that you have. So let's get started. We've sent out invitations. We've made all of our settings. We're ready to start the Zoom meeting. And there we go. We suddenly have people on the Zoom meeting. And you can get an idea of what kinds of things show up on the host screen. And we're going to focus a little bit on a number of things in that one. The view that you're seeing right now that has a great picture of Reggie's office and along with Zoe, his dog, who is enjoying the Zoom meeting herself. She loves Zoom meetings because Reggie has so many Zoom meetings. But if you look at the top right of your screen, or kind of the middle right of your screen, you'll see two views up there. One of them says gallery view. And what we're in right now is not the gallery view. It's what we call the speaker's view. And the speaker's view ends up letting the person who is actually speaking at that time be highlighted and take up the majority of the screen. The gallery view takes all the participants and puts them on equal footing with the same size screen, and you can have lots and lots of people participate. When we have our whole Plano office, for example, participate in a Zoom conference, it takes up more people than I have room for on one screen. And if I do it on my iPad, all I do is to reach over and swipe left, and I get to see another full screen so that we have everybody there. But be aware that you can change the gallery view versus the speaker view. And be aware also that in this particular slide that you see set up, you have a participant section, which is over on the right. We're going to emphasize that in just a minute because it's a simple and easy thing to use, but so important in what we do. Okay, so there's the participant screen. And if you see the participant screen, you can see who's muted, who has their video on or off. You can even see who's speaking. And in this one, it was Reggie who was the host of this session that we did. But also at the very bottom of that screen, you have some other options. Just making you aware that they are there, just making you aware that you as the host can have a great deal of control over what people do or what people don't do in the way that they participate in your Zoom conference. So going on to the next slide. If we want to do any screen sharing, so there's a button down at the bottom that says screen share and allows you to do sharing. And the first thing that happens when you pull that up is you see a screen like this. Now it shows my desktop on the top left and shows that Craig was the one who was speaking at that particular time, but it also gives me an opportunity for a whiteboard, for an iPhone or iPad via AirPlay. Well, now that's kind of interesting. It means that you don't even have to necessarily have your document preloaded on your screen, but instead you can have it on your iPad and you can do AirPlay with your computer to do that. Or you can plug in your iPhone via cable, which is the next one over. And both of those can be real boons, especially if you're getting other documents that you had not preloaded on there. In this particular screen, it had a couple of other documents that were there, but whatever you have open on your computer, those are the things that will show up when you're doing a screen share of that nature. Okay, so this goes to the gallery view. And as you can see, the button at the top left shows that it was recording at that time. So you can always see whether someone is recording. If you as the host didn't worry about giving permission or doing something like that, you're able to see whether somebody is recording. You're able to see whether there are any unannounced visitors, like little Miss Hannah, who joined our Zoom meeting with Sally when we were doing this previously. But it's, again, just an example of some of the controls and some of the options that you have when you are hosting a meeting. So let's go on. When you're going to more advanced screen sharing, you can change things. You can do just the portion of a screen, or you can do a music or computer sound only. You can see that I've punched the advanced button at the top center of that screen. You can also do content from a second camera. Most of those things are not things that we will need now, but I promise you that the more we use Zoom, the more adept we all become at it, the more likely it is that either you or someone else will want to do it. And of course, you see right next to the advanced button at the top center, the Files button. And the Files button is one that gives you access to all the files on your device so that you can use those for sharing as well. So let's go on to the next one. The next one shows in the Files button that you can access cloud-based servers like Dropbox, Microsoft OneDrive, Google Drive. All of those are great tools, especially if you are sharing documents with any of the Zoom participants. And those are easy to use, and I'm just using those as a demonstration so that you can see where they will be the next time you need to share documents in your Zoom presentation as well. Okay, when you are doing sharing, you have some advanced sharing options. And you can set your sharing where how many participants can share at the same time. You can have one, or you can have multiple participants sharing at the same time. You can set it where only the host is doing the screen sharing, or where all participants are doing that. It also says who can start the screen sharing. And sometimes you may host an event only because you have a pro account that allows you to go over the 40 minutes and allows you to have more people in attendance, but you may be wanting somebody else to take charge and they don't have a pro account. And so you may want to allow someone else to start sharing as opposed to just limiting it to the host. Okay, going on down the list, we are now to section 2. And I'm sure I'll have more to say, although you may not want to hear it, but I'm going to turn it back over to our moderator and organizer, Mr. Reginald Hirsch.
Thanks, Rick. The second section of the 4 sections that we'll deal with is one that has produced a lot of inquiry to most of the speakers, and that is how to participate in a Zoom conference. And we're going to start with the basics from the very beginning, and that is you've not loaded Zoom on your computer or your iPad or your Mac, and you get an invitation or there's a discussion that the court's going to utilize Zoom, and you're kind of a little bit lost on how to get Zoom up and operating where you're what's called as an invitee or participant. So we're going to take you through those steps slowly at first, and then hopefully give you enough information so by the end of this section, at least you're somewhat fluent in all of the things you can do with Zoom as a participant. First thing that'll happen is the host, which in this case we utilize Rick, and you saw where he initiated a Zoom hosting event, will send you an invitation. The invitation will look very much like what's on the screen here. You can see that we've got an invitation, and at the first top arrow, we indicate the website where if you click on, you'll immediately be taken to the Zoom meeting. You'll notice that I've Z'd out the ID of the particular meeting and changed the password to ZXXXX. And you can see below where there's a meeting ID and a password. All of that will be filled in that first link, number 1. The second thing I want to point out to you, and this is very important, is where it says One Tap Mobile, and that's the arrow on the left, is a phone number. In this case, it's a local number here in Houston. That's for business users, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, or pro users, as Zoom calls it. This is important for a couple of reasons. Very specifically, with the heavy usage that Zoom is now having, and with the vicissitudes of your various internet connectivity, such as through Ethernet, Wi-Fi, they're getting hammered. In fact, the internet's getting hammered. And so what you don't want to be is in a hearing or a mediation or a conference with your client and you lose audio. They may be able to see you. You may be able to hear parts of what you're saying. You may not be able to have the quality of communication you want. Well, that phone number is a backup. And what the backup does is get the audio from the conference, meeting, or mediation or hearing, so that you can hear what's taking place and also you can speak. So in case of loss of audio, you want to remember and take a look at that phone number. Now, for those of you that are hosting on a free account, you will not have the ability to use a local number, okay? So one of the benefits, and we'll talk about that when you're hosting, and Rick pointed it out, when you're hosting and you use the pro account, there are a number of benefits. But for right now, you will tell you that you'll immediately get a link if you don't have Zoom, if you hit that HTTP, the web URL for the conference, and you'll see something that looks like this. And what you want to do is to download Zoom. Now, one of the first things they'll ask you to do is to register with your email address and create a password. For the registration for Texas lawyers, it is recommended that you use your state bar provided email address. That's not e-service, that's your business address. Whatever it is, joesmith@smithlaw.com. Use that email address. Some courts are requiring you to use that because it's easier for court coordinators to look up and have a state bar address associated with it, such as on service or such as on notification purpose, for notification purposes. So they're requiring you to use your state bar provided email address. So make it simple. Go ahead and register under it. 2, let's talk about the accounts. They have a free account. Doesn't cost you any money. You download, you're in the free account. You say, gosh, that's good. What can I do with it? And what are the limitations? One of the limitations is that if you have more than 4 users, you're hosting a conference as provided, as Rick has shown you how to set up, and you invite 3 other people, you will time out, or 2 other people, and a third person joins, which means you have 4 people because the host is counted as 1 user. You will time out after 40 minutes on the free version. But if you're having one-on-one communication with a family member, your child, another client, whatever, there is no timeout. As long as you stay under 3 or under, you're fine to have a communication as long as you need. Now, as a participant, I get a question, well, wait, I've got the free account. Am I going to time out under 40 minutes or over 40 minutes? And the answer is no. This is controlled by the host. Whatever plan the host is under, you will be under. So if the host has got the pro account, which is up to 100 users, you won't time out after 40 minutes. But if the host has the free account and you're the fourth person, or there are 4 people, including the host being one of them, online, at 40 minutes, the door will slam and you will get a disconnect. The 4th tip is we recommend, even if you're just a starter, we want you to go ahead and get the Zoom account, get the Zoom application loaded, because it gives you an opportunity to explore its usage. You want to practice hosting, just so you can see everything that Rick's talked about. You can review this as a participant. You can use your staff members. You can use a family member. You can host, send them the email, have them go through the steps of loading it, giving a user ID, and then you can play with the attributes of the program. Some are very simple, some are a little more complex, and you have an opportunity to test it before you go live with a court or a mediator. And I certainly recommend you do that. In addition, I recommend if your client's going to be on a host, are going to be a participant in a hearing or mediation, you certainly want to connect with them and make sure they've got the connectivity. You also want to point out that their background may not be appropriate for either a court proceeding or for a mediation. And you want to make sure they're familiar with the controls and how waiting rooms are used and when you can and cannot privately communicate. You can't talk when the judge is talking. That's considered an ex parte communication unless you're either testifying or the judge asks you a question. All of those basics you want to work out with your clients before, or witnesses, before going into a hearing or before going into mediation. If you buy the monthly subscription, which is basically $14.99 a month, which is known as the pro version, the limitations of the 40 minutes goes away. You can have up to 100 conferees or participants participating. Interesting enough, as a side note, when we get to gallery view, you're only able to see 49 on the screen. If you slide over, you can get the other 49. I don't know what happens to the dangling 2 after that, but you can get up to 100 participants. You're not going to be able to see 100 participants, but you'll be able to have 100 participants. After you install the app, the first prompt and you log in, one of the first prompts you'll see is test the computer audio. We cannot emphasize enough to you that you really need to do this because you want to make sure your audio and visual are working. So once you click on test audio, and by the way, I recommend you do this every single time you get that prompt because you want to make sure you're in communication with the host and the other participants. And you'll see, you immediately go to audio and you see up there, you can test the speaker and the microphone. You want to make sure they're working. The speaker will play a little tone. You make sure you can hear that. You'll click yes. The microphone will show where your voice amplification is going. You can see the bars there. It's a little bit low and you can adjust the volume on your microphone. Important to do this, critically important to do this. Before you're even doing a conference or going into a conference or hearing or mediation, but you certainly want to do it on initial login. Now, the other thing you want to check is your video, which is right above audio. The reason for that is you want to see what you look like, right? You want to make sure the background's appropriate. You want to make sure you're in kind of the center of the screen. You're not way over here, or you're not down here, or your head's not way up in here. That's my forehead. And you also want to be in 16.9. And the reason you want to be in 16.9, that's widescreen, okay? If you do original ratio, that's going to look like the screen is this with black bars here. Now, some of you, like me, like to use my hands, right? So it's not effective to look like you've lost your hands when you're in the middle of doing a presentation or making a point over here, and all you're seeing is this part of the screen. So always use always use widescreen 16.9. Now, I will tell you, the third button down or fourth button down is touch up my appearance. You will not lose 40 pounds, and you will not have hair on the top of your head. So the touch up is light, very light. Your mileage will vary depending on use, and it is not necessarily the ultimate makeover, okay? So remember that when you hit touch up, you can certainly play with it. Virtual backgrounds, Rick talked about. I want to do that fairly quickly. There are about 4 to 6 screens that will be provided by Zoom. None of them are really totally appropriate for lawyers. And the problem is lawyers that play with virtual screens, you can kind of tell the rookies from the professionals because they're using the 6 or so backgrounds, clouds or whatever, the Golden Gate Bridge. Be a little more creative with that. So the way you can be creative is you'll see right under this young lady's picture on the right side between the Zoom backgrounds, which are below, and her picture, on the right side is a little plus. And the plus is for adding additional pictures or videos, short videos of backgrounds. Where can you get backgrounds? Well, the websites that provide backgrounds, some at a cost, some not at a cost. You can Google backgrounds. For instance, if you want a modern office, Google modern office, look at images, you see one you like, right click, save it as an image, hit the plus, go to your pictures, load it, and you will have that background. You can be very inventive and very creative. One thing we would warn you about, and Craig and I have experienced this in various video conferences that we've had under Zoom, if you've got light coming in from the right, or as you see from the top of my head, light is coming down because my fluorescent lights are right above me in my office, not the best in the world. But what is good about that is if I have a light background and I'm moving around like this, there creates artifacts. So the artifacts are your hands will disappear, you'll look a little bit out of motion. It's a little disruptive at times. In fact, there are occasions where you will literally disappear if you turn all the way sideways. So generally what we recommend is if you're in a light room, use a dark background. If you use too light, you may confuse the background and the camera's trying to adjust. But test your backgrounds to make sure you've got an appropriate background depending on your lighting. Very important. But be creative and take a look around. There's a lot to look at. In the main screen, you'll see this little wheel on the left, which is basically their settings. And their general settings you probably want to originally set when you get Zoom installed. And one of those, as you'll notice I'm under the home button, is I like to have Zoom start when Windows starts. It's readily available. If I decide I want to immediately have a conference or confer with somebody, I have the availability of doing it right away, and I'm on a roll. It's also there in case I get an incoming, somebody wants an instant meeting, it's available. So I recommend you go through all of these settings that we have here on the left, and I'm going to explore two others that are not normally discussed in presentations on the settings in Zoom. One is statistics, and why I like statistics to look at, besides just kind of the nerdiness of me, is that it tells me how much of the engine I'm using, that's the CPU, how much memory I'm using, and how much bandwidth. Now, memory is important because when you're running a lot, first of all, Zoom uses a lot of gasoline. It'll burn every drop of gasoline, and I'm going to call that memory, okay? So you got to be careful when you're running background applications such as PowerPoint, your mail service, your Windows browsers, you're consuming a bunch of gasoline also. Zoom wants as much as it can, and occasionally you'll see a couple things. You'll see the audio get disrupted. You'll hear the kind of this, what I call the stuttification, which is stuttering. You'll hear, it's a word I made up, what can I tell you? You'll see the video start blinking in and out. It's because there are resources that are not being shared, can't be shared at the same time because you've exhausted memory, and it's either paging out or it's using memory that it can't access and it gives up. So you always want to check that if you're having a problem, and make sure you close as many programs as you can before you start Zoom, other than those that you may be sharing, in order to keep your resources as high or to keep your gasoline tank full. The bandwidth's important because a lot of times the internet is getting slammed with Zoom users. And so Zoom itself is sometimes overcrowded depending on what part of the day. ISPs, which are internet service providers, are reporting almost 24-hour-a-day usage, highest levels they've ever seen. Fortunately, they indicate they're able to handle it, but I will tell you, it can be difficult at times depending on your call. The other thing I want to warn you about is, while I'm on this issue of bandwidth, Wi-Fi can be very problematic for those of you that are using, for instance, an iPad or connecting your laptop by Wi-Fi. If you can, we really recommend you use your desktop. You can use your laptop, you can use your iPad, but if you can get an Ethernet connection, that's the wire that runs out of the back of the computer that plugs into the wall or your router or your modem, you are going to get a better, more stable connection, and you're not going to see the kind of disruption that you may on Wi-Fi. So to the extent you can, and particularly in these hearings, I would recommend you get the most stable connection you can get. And if you can, I would use Ethernet as a preference over all other internet connectivity, such as Wi-Fi. The second screen is really the shortcuts. We don't pay much attention about that. And in a second, I'll show you when I do a snapshot from an iPad and show you how to use that from a trial procedure. there are a number of shortcuts that are out there available to use with Zoom that are somewhat helpful to you. I have a cheat sheet that I keep next to every Zoom conference that I'm in, which gives me 5 or 10 commands. Pretty much got them memorized at this point, but it's helpful to have a short command set of what F6, F5, alternate F1. They're not the friendliest, and of course they're not related to what you would think, you know, alternate S for, you know, switch speaker or something is not the command, but to switch speaker view is alternate F1. Enable uniform global shortcuts means that if you're not actually in Zoom, but you're participating and you need to access it from outside the program, for instance, you're in a share position, you can use the global commands. When I'm, for instance, in this PowerPoint, I could access it without actually being in the full screen Zoom. One of my favorite things to talk about, extension and plugins. Extensions go into your web browsers. Plugins usually go into your mail app. Zoom has a couple of extensions, both for Chrome, and now that Chrome is embedded, former Chrome core is embedded in Microsoft Edge. For you Windows users, you have now an app that will install, an extension that will install directly into your browsers to give you access to start a meeting, join a meeting, or create a meeting. Those are very helpful. But my favorite is the Outlook plugin. And let me show you what that looks like. And all of these are available on the Zoom site. The Outlook plugin, and I just took a snapshot of the corner of my Outlook 365, and you can see there right immediately that I can schedule a meeting from Outlook because it's right next to new mail and new items and the home button, or I can start an instant meeting. And so this is very helpful because I only have to be in my Outlook, which is basically what most of us use throughout the day, which is our mail, our email that we're checking from our clients or from the courts. And I can originally schedule a meeting or go ahead and create an instant meeting. Instant meetings, or you decide you've got a friend on the phone that you haven't seen in years, and you just go, well, let me see you visually. Why don't I create an instant meeting? You create an instant meeting. That means you're already in Zoom. You've got your meeting ID and password. You send them the link, and we're conversing and hopefully hearing each other at the same time. Good way to connect. Now, Mac users, don't fret. There's a plugin for Mac. As I point out, for you Mac users, you open Outlook, you click File and Manage Add-ins, and then you hit the plus, and you're in the Office Store, where you'll find a Zoom plugin right there. Same features, create or schedule or do an instant meeting for Zoom. Nice plugins to have. Okay? Now, one of the things that drives everybody crazy during Zoom conferences is this. Meaning, I can't hear you, right? So we're going over here, meaning look at the unmute button. You'll see, and now hopefully they can hear you, you'll see a strike through it. If you click that, okay, you will unmute and we will be able to hear you. Now, also the same thing with video. You look at the little to the right of there's the video, might be a strike through the video. We're not seeing you. I can't tell you how many conferences we've had where we hear people and we go, we can't see you. Well, I can't go, hit the start video. But I can, hopefully, if they're hearing me, I can kind of, and they are not muted, then we're really in trouble because then you really need a lot of sign language to converse with that. You almost need to hold up this PowerPoint, right? And show it to them and point, maybe, or maybe print it out. And thought about that. It's a good alternative. Now, the other attribute is, if you'll notice, there's a little character. Looks like this to the right of the unmute and stop video. They're important because this is going to be present on your screen the entire time you're a participant, unless you're sharing a screen. And as a participant, you should use that because you can check and see where your microphone, which microphone you're using and which speaker you're using. On the same thing on the video, the nice thing about hitting the video at any time is you know which camera you're on. You can change your video setting, but you can also immediately change your virtual background. So if it's not appropriate, remember, go to the start video, the video remember this, the little tent, the little upside down V, and go ahead and check virtual background. Now, the other thing that happens in these conferences, in Zoom conferences, is you get the one-dimensional screen. Here it is, your participant screen, and where is everybody else? I used to see them. I've lost them. Well, if you notice the little 9 boxes over there, where the arrow is, that's switch to gallery view. And if you switch to gallery view, and this is not a very good example, but in this case, we've got the other screens. So we've got the other screens available, okay? So everybody else at gallery view, it's up to 49. Heaven help you. You've got more than, you got 49 participants. I don't know where you're going to put them, but you're going to put them on your screen, but they're going to be about that big. But that's where you get the gallery view, everybody that's in the particular hearing, conference, or mediation, okay? Unless they're in waiting rooms. And we'll talk, and I'll let Craig talk about that. The other thing you'll notice is above the switch to gallery view is what's called switch camera. So if you've got an iPad or an iPhone, and let's say you're in mediation, and the mediator says to you, well, Mr. Jones would like to see the last April bank statement for the Chase account. And the client says, well, I just happen to have that with me. Switch to camera view, and in this case, you see I've got my Zoom cheat sheet. Also in trial, you're in a Zoom hearing with the judge, your exhibits have been marked, but all of a sudden in cross or rebuttal testimony, you've got an exhibit that has not been shown because the chat feature periodically allows you to upload and download files, and sometimes Zoom takes it away for security reasons, and sometimes you get notice and sometimes you don't. But for whatever reason, if you wanted to, you could use your camera and do a snapshot and distribute it that way accordingly. Not going to make the court reporter necessarily happy. You probably have to just do a screenshot and send it, but at least it gives you the flexibility of using dynamically, which I know Rick loves from a trial standpoint, dynamically from showing something that may not have been pre-marked or pre-offered, and gives you an opportunity to kind of dynamically shape things, okay, by using an outside exhibit. The 3 dots in the upper right, this is off the iPad, but you should have a similar view on your Zoom when you're a participant. Basically gives you a number of features, but once again, it gives you the opportunity of the virtual background. But remember, you can also get to that by using to the right of the video, the little tent that I like to call it. You can also change meeting settings, and if you wish to be a host, you can request being a host, okay? Which, by the way, goes to the host, and they can co-host with you. And why do we have co-host? If you have to walk away from a meeting, you may want to assign it to somebody till you get back. It gives them the control of who can communicate and share screens, a lot of features that Rick talked about. The other is shared content, and this is important. This allows you to share your screen, and there'll be more discussion about that. Sally and Craig will talk about it. Shared screen means that whatever on your desktop or your background for your iPad or iPhone will be immediately shown. You can click on, for instance, Safari and have it produce whatever screen. You know what photos are. That's where you can go to your pictures. And then there are 5 iCloud or cloud services: iCloud Drive, Box, Dropbox, Google, and Microsoft Office. If you're going to use one of those, let me make a recommendation to you. The first time you use it, for instance, you're using Dropbox. The first time you use it, you're going to have to log in. So, well, once you log in, you'll never have to do that again. So if you don't want to sit around in the middle of a hearing or mediation and futz around with your login and try to remember your password, go ahead, whatever iCloud services you're using or wherever you store your document, make sure you can bring up Zoom just natively, start a Zoom meeting, your picture's on there, and go ahead and go share content, pick out Dropbox, go ahead, log in. It'll be preserved on your machine, and you won't waste time. The other thing I want to point out is toward the bottom is what's called website URL. This is a very handy feature for both mediation, trial, and even working with your client, because what this does is what gives you access to the outside world, basically the internet. For instance, let's just say you wanted to do a Google search for something. You may be doing this because you may need to go to the Wall Street Journal. I could have put www WSJ.com because I've got a subscription, log into Wall Street Journal. Why would I want to do that? Well, we're discussing in mediation or in the trial with the court in a Zoom conference, we're discussing the value of Dell stock. And we've got Dell stock at 42 on their inventory. We've got it at 38 with the vicissitudes of the Dow Jones Industrial Averages, which can cause nausea in a matter of nanoseconds by looking at it too often and putting a pit in your stomach. You may want real-time numbers available for the court, okay? And so this is a great way to share with the court the actual value of some entity like a publicly held company on the Dow Jones Industrial Averages. It's important, okay? Sally will tell a story. I think she's going to tell a story about looking up case law, and I'll let her do that. There are all kinds of things you can do by having web access and doing it live. I cannot impress upon you how valuable a tool that can be in the right situation, in the right time frame, when you're in the middle of either trial, mediation, or even working with your clients. So consider that. And that's what happens when I load Google. Okay, Reginald, I am so lost. I know I might replay this video, and then again, I might not. But where else can I find information? You know, I got so much spinning in my head at this time. I've got a migraine. We understand that. But Zoom, believe it or not, has a very good help center from the basics to the advanced. And you will find a number of tutorials, a number of manuals, and you got to spend a little time with this program. It's not native. Even those of us speaking today, by sharing information among the four of us, we have all learned new things. That's the great thing about life, is you experience new things, okay? You learn. So we're not leading experts on every topic in Zoom, but trust me, Zoom has probably heard every complaint that can be made about this program and produced a tutorial. Why? Because their help center gets overflowed. They will then point out what are the I assume, and I believe this because I see what they're posting. I believe that once they have, a criteria that, we got 200 calls with regard to this issue, they're turning to their engineers who are then turning to the staff and say, do a video or do a manual on this issue. And you can see from this screen, which I'm holding a little bit on, you can see that there are a number of videos, sources, communication. And the other thing Zoom does, believe it or not, they do periodically during the week live conferencing. And what they'll do is you're not available to be seen. They'll have an instructor, but you are able to add through chat, you're able to ask questions. And at the end of their tutorials where they're doing a live seminar or webinar, they will answer as many questions as they can. So it's very, very helpful. And you'll see a listing of that. So Google Zoom Help Center, and you will find qualitatively and quantitatively a great deal of information. It is my pleasure at this time to turn over the presentation for section 3, and I invite you to carefully listen because this is an important component, although all 4 are very important of our sections, to Sally Pretorius with Coons Fuller from Dallas, Texas. Thank you and have a good day.
So it's a pleasure to be here. So thanks for letting me share my experiences on Zoom with you guys. I have gone down many rabbit holes, just kind of exploring the intricacies of Zoom and just being fascinated. Working with Rick, I always appreciate good advocacy. And so when Zoom started coming up as something that was going to be a new outlet for us to be able to participate in hearings, I was really curious about how we were going to be able to preserve the art of advocacy using this, almost personless technology to present to the court. So like I said, I went down a rabbit hole and quickly found myself playing with a lot of the features. And so it's kind of fun to be able to share all of that with you guys. Let me go ahead and pull up my PowerPoint. But before I do that, I don't know, just to kind of I think we have a little bit of time. So just to piggyback on what Rick and Reggie were talking about. I think that when you are presenting one of your Zoom hearings, it's really important to make sure that your background is a professional one. And to play off of that, our marketing team has done a really good job in creating these virtual backgrounds for us. I practice from home right now with the shelter in place, and my husband and I share an office. So you guys really don't want to see what's behind me. He's in finance, so he's running 3 screens, running the Bloomberg terminal, and we have a computer or a TV running the news all the time. So in addition to a baby, so half of it's a daycare, half of it's a dog, bed, and then the other half is him playing in the background. So these were super simple for our marketing department to create. I also have one that if you just think it's kind of fun, you can be in a courtroom. I think that it's important just to kind of visualize where you are. So this is my courtroom one, if in case I'm in a courtroom, but I will stay in our lobby of our office for right now. But getting back to the PowerPoint, so I'm going to get this going. So like I said, when I was going down this rabbit hole of learning how to use Zoom and make sure that it was something that we were all prepared for, this was something that was pretty exciting. So Rick and I had our first, I had my first hearing last week, and Rick and I had the pleasure of trying a case together earlier this week. And we went through a lot of trial and errors, and think we found a good way to present a case to a court that is in a concise, good, user-friendly way. So here we go. So first things first, when you have your first Zoom hearing, it is important, and it is probably best to have everything in a PDF format. So the first slide, obviously, first things first, create PDFs. So the first thing is get all of your exhibits. Preparation is key. So when you're preparing your case, I think it's important to make sure that you have everything that you would have if you were going to a normal hearing. So in Collin County, they limit us to 20 minutes, and the local rules say what we are and what we have to bring to court, as many counties I'm sure have. So one of them is our financial information sheet, tax returns, our requested relief. So make sure you have all of that ready to go. I recommend creating a separate folder on your server or on your desktop and have everything ready to go. Once you've sort of strategized and can figure out what you're going to use for the hearing and have it saved in that folder, the next step is to create all of them into PDFs. And I find it better to use PDFs just because they're easier to share. And as we go through the presentation, Zoom has a lot of tricks and things that you can use with the PDF, and I find that they're a lot more user-friendly. Also, it's very close to what you would do if you were in court, right? So if you were in court, you wouldn't be able to present a Word document to the court, and the court reporter wouldn't be able to take a Word document off of your computer. So a PDF is the closest thing to a final version that you'll be able to present to the court. So once you have all of the documents that you're going to be using in whatever format, put them all in one folder. Once you have them in that folder, I suggest creating everything into a PDF. So the first things first is if you have a Word document like your requested relief or your financial information statement form, or if you have any sort of documents, saving them as a PDF. I find that the easiest way to do it, and we had a little bit of debate and I couldn't find a good answer for why I do it the way I do, or if there's a better way to do it, I always print to PDF. Maybe because I'm a Mac user, it was just always the best thing for me to do. It's easier. So I have a little bit of demonstrative up here, and I think this PowerPoint's going to be made available after this. So if you guys need to screenshot any of these, and there's my dog doing her famous ear shake. If you need to save any of these are really good images that teach you how to save things to PDF. So as this sorry, as this slide shows, the first thing to do is to hit print, and then there should be an option to Microsoft Print to PDF, and then over here you can save it as the file name. So I would recommend probably not using a file name like My Awesome PDF, but using something a little bit more professional, like Mother's Financial Information Sheet or something of that nature. Once you have a document saved as a PDF, you can also save any images. So, when you're representing mom or dad, a little trick that I always like to use is to use images for to bolster my client, right? To say, look, this is how great of a mom my client is. Look at pictures of her with the kiddo. So if you have the images saved in that folder, what you do is you right click on all of them and then you click to the print. And once you click them as print, that automatically combines them as one exhibit. So if you were, say, trying a protective order case and you had pictures of the abuse, or if you had pictures of, you know, mom being a good mom or dad being a good dad, or pictures of what the kiddo's room looks like, you can combine each of those by just right-clicking them, selecting print, and then saving. The next slide here, we'll talk about this little trick that I learned when I was listening to Office Hours from Judge Miskell here in Collin County. One of the participants suggested using exhibit stickers. I know there is a way when you are in PDF or an Adobe PDF, Adobe Pro will let you add on exhibit stickers, but exhibitsticker.com allows for you to use this super simple little exhibit sticker that you can attach to a PDF. So that way, when you have your PDFs ready to go and be submitted, they look professional, and they can say, you can type on there respondents 1 or mothers 1 or fathers 1, whatever your court prefers. So Rick and I learned when we were trying our last hearing, and each judge is going to want things a little bit differently. So obviously follow what your court coordinator and what your judge are telling you how they prefer. One of our courts up here submits a Dropbox links for you to upload all of your exhibits. Another one of our courts just asks that you email them into them. And when we were finding that the court wanted us to email our exhibits in and also send them to opposing counsel, we wanted to make sure that we had them in a concise way and an easy way for the judge to follow along. So that way we weren't saying, Judge, please refer to the 4th of 9 exhibits that we sent to you. That's where this exhibit was. So we combined all of our exhibits into one PDF, and we found that this was the best way to present our case. So in order to combine a PDF, you will open them up in Adobe, and over here where it says the first thing you do is you click that little red arrow with a square and the plus sign, and that lets you edit them. Then you hit over here where it says multiple files, and then you click combine files. Once you've done that, it will then allow you to add files. So once you have all of your PDFs saved in that folder, once you click on add files, you can then select folder and select all of the PDFs that you want to combine into one. So this is a good example of what ours looked like. We were able to move them around and put them in order as we intended to present them. So we had exhibit 1, our requested relief, our exhibit list, exhibit 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you arrange them the way you want them. And then you up here on the top, you click combine. And once you click combine, it is going to allow you to then save that one large PDF with all of your exhibits. Rick and I found when we were doing our hearing this past week that it was best to sort of use an exhibit list is to show the judge where we were going. So we took what was our normal exhibit list that has our offer admitted and denied. And then we listed all the exhibit names. And what we did was something that was a little bit different, and it worked really well. So each of these where you can see that it's italicized and underlined in blue is where we created a hyperlink. And we're going to go into how to create those. So within the PDF, if the judge were in our PDF and wanted to go to our proposed order on a writ, he could click on number 2, and that would immediately take him to the spot in our PDF where that exhibit was located. The same thing went for each and every one of our sub exhibits. We also created bookmarks, which we will go into in a second, which really just helps the court reporter, opposing counsel, the witness, and whoever's helping you, or if you're running a hearing solo, to be able to navigate. Because like I said, we're run on time limits. I'm sure most courts are run on time limits. And we had to make sure we could present our case as smoothly, as efficiently as possible. So in order to create a table of contents, it is a little bit of a tricky process. And Reggie was so kind as to point me in the direction of this really good video. And here's, if you go to YouTube, this eHow Tech, how to create a table of contents in an Adobe PDF. If you watch that video, it actually walks you through creating a table of contents much cleaner and conciser than I would be able to do here. And since it's such an intensive process, and it's not difficult, it's just step heavy, it's probably best just to go ahead and watch the video than to have me try to go back and recreate the wheel. But Reggie does have a couple of quick tips on creating a table of content. And these are pretty genius. So if you want to screenshot this screen, or when you go back and you're creating your table of contents, if you do follow this, it will help you create a table of contents a little bit easier, and you can put your table of contents in whatever format you want. Creating bookmarks. So bookmarks is what we found was the best way to create something and be able to allow the judge to follow along with what we were presenting. So to create a bookmark, so here you can see we had 157 pages of exhibits. And this was one of our longer, bigger cases, just because we had police reports and multiple Our Family Wizard communications and our proposed orders and pleadings, and you know, a motion for enforcement contained an entire order that was attached to it. So it was a lengthy exhibit. So when we went through, and my paralegal was amazing, she went through and clicked this little, where the arrow is, to create a bookmark. So once you have this larger document open, you click the bookmark. Once you click the bookmark, then you click this add sign right here. And then you, once you have the bookmark, that we went through steps 1 and 2, you use select tool to select the area of the page you want to bookmark, and then you drag an image, or you drag a little box around the image. Once you've selected that, you select the bookmark under which you want to place a new bookmark, and then you click add bookmark. Once you've then added the bookmark, in the left-hand panel, it will give you an option to be able to type in how you want to name it. So for us, we would name Exhibit 1, or Mother's 1, or Mothers to Our Family Wizard. We named each one to match up with our exhibit list. Once we had the bookmarks, we then created hyperlinks, and the hyperlinks was something that took us a while to figure out. So I hope that this is helpful for everybody when you're learning. It'll save you a couple hours of research, because they're a little tricky. And I will, at the end of when we're talking about hyperlinks, I'll be able to tell you the one little trick that saves you a couple hours of work. So when you're in your PDF, you click this where it says link. Once you've clicked link, then you click on add or edit web or document link. Then it's going to pull this up. So you'll block the words you want to hyperlink, and then this is the box that's going to pop up. And these are the settings we preferred, so I went ahead and saved them, so that way if you guys wanted to follow along with how we did it, this was what we found was the best way possible. After you fix the settings, then you click next, and this pops up, and you click set link. You go to the page where you want it to take you, and then you hit set link. So once, that's how you create the hyperlink. And don't hit set link before you're on the page. So the little trick that we learned after this was that you have to hit save after you click each link, or else it won't save. So clicking save after each one will allow you to create multiple hyperlinks within your document. So voila, we had hyperlinks and bookmarks, and this is what our final document looked like when we were able to email this to the court and opposing counsel. And it was super easy to navigate. When Rick was taking one of his witnesses, I was, you know, his co-counsel, so he would say, please pull up Exhibit 6J, and I was able to ask the court to share the screen. I could hyperlink to 6J when he needed to go to 8D. He would say, I'm moving on to 8D, and I was able to just use these hyperlinks that are here on the actual exhibit list. Or if I was within a document, you know, say if I was in Exhibit 8B, and he said, I'm moving up to our requested relief, I could then click on Exhibit 2 using the bookmark. So it allowed us to navigate through this very lengthy document very quickly within the hearing. So publishing your exhibit. This is one of those where I think, you know, when you're in mock trial, I taught mock trial for a little while, and when I was a mock trial junkie, you know, one of the things that we always hammered into our advocates was, don't forget to ask to approach, right? So before, you never want to walk up to a judge and just hand them something. A lot of judges will jump down your throat if you do that. So this is one of those things that I think is going to have to become second nature when you're doing a Zoom hearing, is saying, Judge, may I please have the screen? And I think that's very similar to saying, may I approach? Because the judge is, you know, the Zoom hearing is very much their courtroom. So they may either have to grant you access, but I also think it's a sort of a sign of respect and keeps a little bit of the same demeanor that we had in the courtroom. And that's just a personal preference, but I do prefer saying, "Judge, may I have the screen," as opposed to just taking over the screen and the judge saying, you know, "Miss Pretorius, what are you doing? What are you sharing?" So the judge was very good about sharing, like allowing us to use the screen as soon as we asked. One thing that I would suggest doing when you're publishing your exhibits is practicing this with a paralegal or a co-counsel or just a colleague, or just running a practice Zoom session by yourself, because it does take a little bit of practice. This is always a little funny cartoon that makes me kind of chuckle. But I think that practicing is a good way to go before you start any hearing. The last bullet point on here I have is have a backup plan. So when I had an ex parte hearing the weekend before, and we had it before the actual hearing, the court didn't have share screen enabled for us. And so the judge wanted to see a couple of the exhibits, and a couple of the exhibits that they had attached hadn't been emailed to the judge yet. And so since he didn't know how to share the screen quite at that point in time, we had to improvise. And so I think it's good to have, you know, either an iPad, or if you want to have your iPhone next to you, it's always a possibility just to be able to, you know, show your iPad to this judge. I have a virtual background, so it's a little bit harder right now, but you could take your virtual background, and it's white. So you could always just show your exhibit to the judge and then clarify and email it to the court reporter to their date to clarify or to keep your record. So always make sure and have a backup plan. If you want to have a hard copy in front of you and just show that to the judge, you can always go old school if technology fails you. So you've heard us talk a lot about sharing your screen. So this is where it gets fun. So to share your screen, at the bottom of your screen, there is a little green guy, and it says share screen. So when you're ready, you will click share screen, and it will take you to this screen. And this screen will show you all of the options that are available to you. So when I hit share screen, when I was doing that time, these were the 4 windows that I had up on my screen. So as you can see, one of them was the exhibit that I was working off of, one of them was my email, one of them was just a finder screen, and then one of them was one of my infamous, I've the limits of the emails that I can send, or the attachments I can send on my emails. Once you have selected the one you want to use, so in this case, I was using this document, you click share. And once you've clicked share, here are some of the features that are going to come up at the top. So for the purposes of this thing, I'm going to end this show, and I'm going to pull up, stop share. I'm going to share a different, here we go. So this was the exhibit that I blanked out for the purposes of today. And when I showed you on the last screen, it showed that at the top of it was a little button that was annotate. And so one of the cool things about annotate is if you click on it, it will allow you to draw, it will allow you to highlight things for the court. So for instance, here I could highlight that. I can also put a check mark if I want to say that this was offered, it was admitted, it was denied. You can undo things, you can redo them. So this one was a cool one. So as we were going along, you could click admitted, and we could just keep track of it for the judge as we went forward. You can also clear a screen when you're ready to clear it all, so that way the court can see it. I can also type things in. So if I wanted to make a correction here, I could say as summary. If the court said I'm not going to admit it, I could just say as summary. And then I could put admitted for the limited purposes and put a little check, or I could put an X mark wherever I wanted. So that is one of the cool little things that you are able to do if you have a PDF. So going back to our, so I could have sworn when I was doing this presentation that it was going to be our 6-month-old that was going to wake up in the middle of this presentation, but I was wrong. It is going to be our dog that is going to want to make an appearance. So one of the beauties of working from home. So here we go back. So as you can see on this one, here was the annotate button. So you can always use the annotate button. screen sharing a video. So much like we had before, when you are sharing an exhibit, a lot of times we have a video. In this particular case that Rick and I tried, did have a video that was pretty key to our case. So we wanted to make sure that we had it up. One of the glitches we ran into was that I didn't think that I needed to have the video up. I assumed that and it just slipped my mind. I thought we had this wonderful PDF ready to go. And so when we were ready to play the video, I didn't have it queued up on my computer. So make sure that you have it queued up. So when you see this screen that we talked about before, it will show up as one of your options. So when you're ready to share a video, you just go back to this screen where you went to share. You should have your video queued up. You'll select the video. Then down here, it is key to select this optimize for full screen video clip, and also make sure you have share computer sound ready to go. So that way, whoever is listening to your presentation can also hear the video. And then you just hit play. Using web links, we heard Reggie talk a little bit about it earlier. Using a web link, you can have Google keyed up as one of the selections. He made a good point and said, you know, if you were trying to show the judge, you know, on a residency restriction or where to allow mom to move, you could quickly pull up maps, or you could pull up Google Maps, or if you have Maps as an app on your Apple, you could type in the distances, or you could say, look, judge, by allowing mom to move, you're allowing her to this alleged address. You're allowing her to move 100 miles away. Just look at traffic here. You can pull things up in real time. So one thing that I was able to do is, you know, we were arguing about a definition of family violence. I was able to pull up the Texas Family Code pretty quick and pull up the definition of family violence. You could show that as an exhibit in a closing. So while I think that it's always best to present in person, I definitely think that there are some pros to being able to present your evidence on Zoom, just because it allows you to have a lot of the information that you would have on your desktop available and ready to go, you know, instead of you having to pull up your family code and not have a copy to present to the judge or admit into evidence. If you need to do that, you can pull it up pretty quickly, take a screenshot, email it to the court reporter as an exhibit for later. With that, I'm always happy to answer any questions. I think it's a learning curve that we're all on, and so we're learning different tricks. Reggie brought up a good point. Make sure that you are up to date on the newest version of Zoom, because they are changing things on a daily basis. For example, a week ago, you could share a file in chat, and they just brought that back. So now you can share a file in chat. So just do a quick Google search and do a run through right before your hearing to make sure that all of the features that you are relying on are still there and haven't changed, because things are changing on a daily basis. And with that, I will turn it over to Craig. And I'm going to stop share. There we go.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. This is Craig Haston. I am really glad to be involved in this. I've worked with Reggie and Rick over the years doing technology presentations, and it's always amazing how much I learn when I work with these guys. And this time, not to take away any shine from them, but working with Sally and learning how to do these PDFs, that's been one of my biggest questions. And how to do a hearing is, how do I best get the information to the judge? And watching her go through the PDF process. And then also I had a talk with with Reggie yesterday evening, how he does it with just a Word doc. So you have two different processes, which are both excellent. So if one judge wants it just in a share folder that you upload to a Dropbox folder, you can use the Microsoft Word version of the way Reggie does it. But if there are judges, Harris County judges especially, who like it in just the way that Rick and Sally did it, which is all in one PDF that's all hyperlinked. And I loved it. I mean, I feel like it's worth the price of admission right there just to watch that. My topic is mediating with Zoom. And the interesting thing about what I do is I didn't start mediating with Zoom 3.5 to 4 weeks ago. I started mediating with Zoom about 2.5 years ago. I was on a ski trip in the mountains, and I wanted to practice my first 2-week vacation of my life, at least of my working life. And I had a couple of lawyers who wanted to mediate with me. I told them I was out of town, I couldn't get into town, and I told them, but I had this idea we could use this thing called Zoom. And I conducted a 10-hour day mediation by Zoom from this little place in Colorado overlooking the ski slopes. We had one group in Pearland and we had another group up in Northwest Harris County. And we were able to settle the case in my very first Zoom experience. And then I've done a few others over time. Sometimes we'll bring in a party who might be in Singapore or some other country who isn't able to be here. But truly, this pandemic and us all having to lock ourselves down has really made me go in and look at all the settings and really try to understand that. And what I'm hoping I'll do is maybe make it easier for those of you who are mediators to better understand what all these settings mean, because there's a lot of settings. My main goal in a mediation is to protect confidentiality. I don't allow recording during my mediations in real life, so I don't want any recording done in my mediations in Zoom. It is a confidential environment and process, so I try to preserve that. You're going to see as I go through my settings how we do that and how we turn off as many different types of recording buttons as there are. Now, for the thing that we're doing right here, it's a whole nother set of settings. And one thing I'm going to talk about is templates for different types of meetings that you may have. So without any further ado, I'm going to talk about mediating with Zoom. The first thing that you see is similar. I think you may have seen it once. I know once with Rick and maybe even once with Reggie. I like people to download the desktop app for their computer. I never want people to be attending a Zoom meeting mediation on their phone. There's not enough screen to work with, and there's all kinds of problems that can be run into, especially with looking at documents and things of that nature. So I always ask people to please take a few moments, download the desktop app, get yourself an account with Zoom. It's free, just like Rick said. You don't need to pay for it. Just get the free app. And then for some reason, it seems to me that if we have the desktop app and we use the desktop app, quite often things work more smoothly. Another thing that's really, really important as a mediator, when I send out my mediation information to the parties along with the link for the seminar or for the mediation, I like to send a little paragraph of information, and it includes what I just said, which is download the desktop app. But I also ask them to please, number one, make sure that you have a really good internet connection, because this video stuff uses a lot of bandwidth, especially if you're using a high definition camera. Secondly, if it's all possible, plug into an Ethernet cable itself, because then you're not going to have any slowdown between the Wi-Fi and the Ethernet cable as it comes to you through the air to your computer. I'm plugged into Ethernet here in my little closet in my office here at home, and it works like a champ. I've got throughput like crazy. I love it. And it also helps the graphics, helps everything be higher res, and helps everything with recording and audio. So as a mediator, I like to start my scheduling at the desktop app, which is right here. I click on the button schedule. And once you click on that button, that will take you to the same type of screen that you saw earlier with Rick. It says schedule meeting, and I just made up a name, Harrison Mediation. And then I put in the time frame for when it's going to happen. Again, Rick mentioned that you should have your meeting ID generate automatically. Again, this is a privacy issue. If you use personal meeting ID, that belongs to you. If you use your personal meeting ID for every mediation and every Zoom meeting you have, your personal meeting ID will be out there. So you don't want that. You want for every mediation to have its own meeting ID that's generated just for that meeting. That helps keep people from jumping into and bombing your meetings. Secondly, again, password, big deal. Always require a meeting password, just like Rick said, for mediations. I go ahead and turn on host video and participants video off to begin with. Here's why. When I first let you in, we try to set up mediation in Zoom just like we would a regular mediation in the physical world. So you're going to enter into a room called a waiting room. and it's kind of like a foyer. And you'll see a screen in a little bit that kind of shows you what you would see if you entered my waiting room. However, once in a while, mistakes get made, mediators press the wrong buttons, and you could accidentally get dumped into the main meeting room. And I don't want, I was just told a story the other day by another lawyer, well, actually another mediator who had mediated, and the wife and the husband both ended up in the main meeting room. And when the mediator was able to pop in there, they were already flipping each other off and cussing each other out. So that wasn't good. So that's why I keep participants' video off to begin with. I prefer people to join by telephone and computer audio. I'd prefer computer audio first, telephone if it fails, like Reggie said earlier. I have mine linked to Outlook, to my Outlook, and you'll see in just a moment how that works. If you've done the link to Outlook, and I also have a link for that in a few moments, you'll see how easy it is for these two to combine and work together. So now it's time to schedule a meeting. So we hit schedule, and I was about to actually hit the actual button. When you hit schedule, if you've downloaded the Zoom and Google integration, you're going to get the same screen you saw earlier. And I've added a little hyperlink over here. I think at some point, you won't have to watch this video just to see these slides. I think the HBA family law section, and I guess Collin County also, will be posting the PowerPoint up at some point after the webinar so that people can download the whole PowerPoint. And the way we designed this was, as you could tell, we're stepping through everything. We'd like you to be able to just use these as a go-by for whatever it is you're doing. So if you're mediating, you should be able to take these one step at a time and really cut down on a lot of your wasted time that we've all been doing in the last 3 to 4 weeks trying to get familiar with this program. So the important thing here is you make sure all your times are right, and then you simply hit the send button up here at the top left-hand corner, and then it will send this message out to everybody who is invited to be participants in the mediation. So the next thing you're going to see here is it looks like we're back to that desktop app, but I'm just doing this to show you because we're diving into settings now. This is maybe for tech geeks like me, this is really exciting because I like to press buttons and see what happens. So if you're like that, we're about to have a lot of fun. Watch the cursor. Go up to the little small button called settings. It's very small. Click on it. Then you get additional settings, but this isn't everything. If you want more, click view more settings. Now it automatically takes you to the Zoom website where about twice as many settings are available. Then once you get there, you click on the button settings, and it will take you to all the settings over here in this area that we need to look at, which is where we're going next. Okay, we've seen that video already. Let's go to something else that's more interesting. So what I'm doing now that we're on the settings page, the settings page, if you were to print this out, it would be about 4 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. And I'm just basically scrolling down the whole list of settings as we go through, and the things that are circled in red or exclamation points are the things that are most important. So here, I want to make sure that when we start meetings, the participant's video is off, which you saw earlier, but the host video is on. I don't anticipate myself saying something stupid because I know I'm about to start a mediation. So I'm going to keep I'm going to control myself up here first so that this says the right things. Secondly, we already talked about telephone and computer audio. I do allow people to join the meeting before I come on. If somebody wants to come on 5 minutes early, I let them join. That's fine because they're going to the waiting room and they'll be in the waiting room alone where they won't see or be able to talk to anybody else. Again, the personal ID, meeting ID, I turn that off just like we discussed a moment ago. All right, moving on. Next screen as we slide downwards. Same thing, always require a password. We've just talked about that. Don't worry about authenticated users joining meetings. If you set up your meetings correctly and you use a waiting room and you don't allow people to record chats and don't allow them to record the video and audio, you don't need everybody to be an authenticated user of Zoom. And you're going to get some angry people if you require everybody to go through several steps to authenticate themselves. Moving on to, we talked about passwords. This is interesting. Embedding a password in the meeting link. If you've done a Zoom meeting before, a lot of the Zoom meetings you join will already have a password, but the password is actually embedded in the link that you get. So when you click on it, you don't have to then go in and type the password. It's automatic. Again, the reason I allow this is because I enable waiting rooms. Then I allow people in, and then I will move them to breakout rooms, or what I call mediation rooms, which we'll get to in a moment. I do require passwords for participants joining by phone. They just have to simply type in the password and off they go. I don't mute participants upon entry because once again, they're in the waiting room. Now, chatting in a meeting and file sharing. This is the next section. You may have noticed when you do Zoom, there's a little button at the bottom of the screen that says chat. Now, when we're in a general meeting where lots of people attend, you can chat with anybody. The host can allow chatting to be however they want. They can allow chatting to happen between just certain individuals privately, or between the host and certain individuals, or between everyone. But when you're in a breakout room, and when I move you into a breakout room, your chats can only happen with the person in your room. So you don't have to worry that whatever you say might be heard or seen or read by the person over in the other breakout room. There's a complete firewall, not a firewall, but there's a complete virtual wall between them. Now, as Sally was just mentioning, this PowerPoint's changed several times over the last week because Zoom keeps changing things. A few days ago, I had a button here that said, file sharing is gone. It may come back. This morning, I had to come back in and go, file sharing, it's back. And we'll talk more about file sharing in a few moments as we go through this. Let's talk about screen sharing by all participants. Quite often throughout the mediation, the other day I was in a mediation as a participant, and the mediator didn't have control of the spreadsheet. I had control of the spreadsheet. So he gave me a lot of screen control so that he could see what I was working with on my spreadsheet. It was a really complicated spreadsheet that had a lot of little bits and pieces to it. And then we were able to use that spreadsheet throughout the meeting, and I controlled the changes. Next, who can start sharing when someone else is sharing? I usually say host only. You don't want everybody in a free-for-all just going, oh no, me, I want you to see what I have. So in a mediation, I allow only the host to start sharing when another share is going on. That means the host can stop somebody's share and then start his own share. Annotation. Annotation is not something particularly that you need. It does come in handy, especially if you have an interpreter. The interpreter can then go in and attend, and he can type up from one language to the other, and then that can actually be saved and the other person can respond to it, and the interpreter can write the responses in the other language. There's something called a whiteboard, and once you hit that share button that Sally was showing us earlier, one of the things that you have is a whiteboard, just like you would in a courtroom, where you take a pen and you just write on it and you can erase it. There's a lot of things you can do on the whiteboard, but I'm not showing it to you. I'll let you click that button and play with it. I don't find it that helpful in mediations. Here's why. Most of the time, people aren't going to be right. They can't physically write on their screen. If they can, it's still going to be kind of difficult. So what I usually do, instead of if we're going to be sharing information, I may pull up a Word document, and as we work through the case during the day, I'm writing the shell of the agreement in this Word document, and as we make changes, I put it into document review and set it for redlining so that everybody can see the changes that we're making, and we accept and reject and revise throughout the day, so that at the end of the day, you don't have to wait for me to go back to my office and type for 30 minutes or 45 minutes. I already have the document done. We're ready then to jam that document, the cover document, the spreadsheet, and any other documents we may have into one complete PDF like Sally was talking about earlier. And then we send that out through one of several methods for signature to the participants. So if we do use a whiteboard though, I'd go ahead and say auto save that, mainly because there's sometimes that we do want something, we do want to put something on the whiteboard, and if you leave share, it's going to wipe out, I believe it's going to wipe out the whiteboard. So I always put auto save it, and we can always go back in and delete it and wipe it clean if we need to. Remote control, I leave remote control on because I, as the host, might for some reason want to let one of the parties take remote control of a document that's on my screen. For example, if they want to write something on the document that I have on my screen, they want to type into it rather than dictating it to me, I'll let them go in and just have control of my screen, and then they can type the information into the document. It works wonderfully. Okay, this is the fun part. I mean, I really think of Zoom. Reggie asked me the other day if I thought Zoom made mediations easier or harder. And honestly, in a lot of ways, it makes them much, much easier, mainly because I can have 3 screens around me, and I can be listening and typing. People can see the changes I'm making on the document, and I can hop back and forth from one room to the other without having to walk around the building to get there. I can quickly hop in one room and hop back in the other room. And plus that, I only have to go about 5 feet to get to the kitchen if I need a snack. So let's talk about the next, so breakout rooms. When you set up a breakout room, you can set up as many breakout rooms as you want. You can assign people before the mediation to breakout rooms so they automatically go in there. But what I've found is that they have to be authenticated users of Zoom or it won't work. So a lot of people aren't authenticated users, so I just gave up on that idea, and instead, when they come into the waiting room, right before this meeting starts, I open the meeting, I create the two or three breakout rooms I need, I name them by the lawyers who are representing the parties, so I'll remember which room I'm in, and then I click a button that then lets me move them to the room. And I'm not going to show you that because it's very self-explanatory. There's a button that pops up and it says, do you want to move them? You click yes, and you move them to the breakout room. I don't know what far end camera control is. It sounds scary. It sounds like recording. And I don't want anybody recording or using my camera, so I just turn it off. Group HD video, I have that turned off, but on the user end, if they want to use HD video, they can control that. I'm just afraid if I do group HD video and somebody has a bad connection and they're being forced to do HD, we're gonna mess up their video feed. Virtual background, I generally turn it off. People can still choose to turn one on. The reason I turn it off, again, it's a bandwidth user, and also it can be distracting, so that if somebody picks a very light background like Reggie was talking about, but they have a very dark office behind them like I do, if you move, you'll see artifacts of the dark office behind you, and it can be distracting. So that's a personal preference. Next, let's see. Let's quickly touch on these because I think we're running through our time here. Allow users to select stereo audio in their client settings, very much like the HD video. The waiting room, I turn it on, and that's my exclamation point. I do want to use a waiting room, and people will sit there and wait until I let them in. But it's not unpleasant because they're actually in their own chair. Next, I put all participants in the waiting room. This is really interesting. Customizing the title, logo, and description, which we'll touch on in a minute. If you click this little button right here, you have some ability to change the message that people see in the waiting room. And then I have this one. Do we allow live streaming meetings? No. Can you imagine what would happen if you accidentally live streamed a mediation onto YouTube? So that is a big no-no. Do not turn that on. All right, this is what my visitors see when they first come to mediation. Well, actually, this is the setup screen. It's not what they actually see. I'll show you that in a minute. And I don't know how that got there, but I just went and grabbed my law firm logo right off my website, uploaded that right there. If this is called the Harrison mediation, this will say Harrison mediation. And then this is what I've written into the box that explains to people what is happening in this mediation room. It'll tell them that they're just waiting briefly until I move them to a room, and that they will see a button that they will need to say, I accept being moved into that room. All right, I mentioned a few minutes ago that when you're doing a Zoom conference, or when you're doing a webinar, or when you're doing a mediation, it requires different settings. And as you can see, there's a lot of settings. I mean, tons. I'm constantly Googling the language of what they call these buttons, because half of them don't make any sense. So what I've done is, once I've had a successful mediation and all the settings were the way I really, really liked them, I first go to meetings on my Zoom web browser, click on previous meetings. It'll bring up the meetings we've had before, and then I will pick the meeting that I really liked. I will then choose that to be a template. I will tell it, I make this a template, and then I can click meeting templates, and then I'll use that mediation as the template for the next time I do this, so I don't have to go back and recreate the wheel on all those settings. I'm going to talk for a moment about in-file in-meeting file sharing. I think about a week ago, I spent about a day with Reggie, and we were both, no, we weren't really pulling hairs out, because, I mean, look at us. But it was frustrating. I mean, I thought I had done something wrong, and the file button wasn't working, because at that point, the file button was there, it just didn't work. Then the next day, it was gone. And then the next day after that, the little box next to it was gone. But yesterday, I believe, or the day before, it showed back up. The great thing about the file share in chat is that you can drop just about anything you want into this little box that says type message here, and any kind of file, PDF, Word docs, text messages, anything you can highlight, you can grab and drop. I believe you could even, I haven't tried it yet, but you may even be able to peel an email out of your email program and drop it straight in there. But also you can go to Microsoft OneDrive, Cloud, Google Drive, and this is a lot like the share thing you saw with earlier, where in sharing you could share from different programs. Here you're actually not just sharing, you're sending a copy of something. For some reason, Dropbox doesn't show up on here. But the workaround for that is to create, I use Dropbox for personal things. So instead you sync Dropbox to your laptop, and then you click on your computer, and then you go to your sync folder, and all those documents are available to you because they're actually on your computer. That is it for me. I hope that your mediation experience is better, and I hope that in setting up your mediations, they're a lot easier now that we have gone through those slides. Always feel free to give me a call. I've done a lot of trainings over the last few weeks with people. I'm happy to help people. I learn as I teach. I know Rick and Reggie and Sally are all the same way. I want to thank my other speakers. I thank Reggie and the Bar Association of Harris County and Family Law Section for asking me to be part of this. And I hope what I've presented is helpful to you.
Thank you, Craig. Why don't we go around just for final thoughts and comments? Rick, if you'll unmute I'd like to hear from you first, then we'll go to Sally, and then Craig for final.
Hey, thanks, Reg. It's been so fun to be able to put this together. And as Craig just said, we learn from presenting, and you too will learn simply by doing. The more you play with the software, the more you play with the technology, the more you play with it on different devices, the more adept you will be at it. I frankly love, since many of you know me as a lawyer that loves to use his iPad, I like using the iPad. It's very simple to use. It's very easy to use. You can expand your screens. It's very easy to mark on slides if you're doing a PowerPoint presentation just like we did a few minutes ago. So I encourage everyone not to be afraid of any of the settings, to go through and drill down into them just like Craig was doing. You'll find this to be a user-friendly software once you kind of get a feel for the way that they've organized it.
Sally?
Yeah, I echo everything everybody has said. Thank you guys for letting me be here and share this. It's been so much fun to go through and learn all of this, and I've learned so much just doing this presentation. But I think that's one of the things that makes us, great advocates is the ability to be able to, think on our feet. And Zoom allows us that. It allows us to get creative. And it's just one more trick to have in our belt buckle, and it'll be really interesting, like Rick was mentioning in his presentation, to see if this is something that continues just for basic pre-trials and for ex parte things that'll actually help save our clients money. I definitely think that it's a really good platform, and it is something that'll help our practice and help us best serve our clients and save them a little bit of attorney's fees in the long run. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Sally. Greg?
I'm a silver lining guy. I think that there's a lot of dark clouds out there in what we do for a living, but there's always a silver lining. There's always a way to make things work. And I think we're proving that by finding this program to make our practices work and make mediations work and keep our clients represented and moving their cases forward. I'm so stoked right now after watching Sally's presentation that I think I'm going to go through my client list and see if I can't figure out a hearing to have over the next few days in one of my cases, just so I can try out what she taught me. I'm sure I can stir up trouble somewhere. But again, the last thing I want to say about mediation is make sure when you get to the end of the mediation, if you've done a great job with Zoom, don't tell everybody print out the MSA on your side and sign it and scan it back in and send it to me. Use a program like DocuSign or Adobe Acrobat Pro, which are set up to send around to people and have them digitally sign. It shows their email, that shows their email address and the date and time that they signed it. And it's actually more secure about it. It's better than when we sign mediated settlement agreements now, because it actually is verified by the computer that that person at that address at that time signed that document. So I wish you all the best. Thank you.
I want to thank my co-speakers. Y'all just did a fabulous job. I can't tell you how much pleasure it brought just working with y'all. And at this time, we will sign off and hopefully see you out there sometime in the future. Everybody have a good day and stay safe.